Welcome to IFAB Online.
Bonjour, amis fundraiser. Bienvenue à IFAB Online.
大家欢迎到 IFAB Online.
Bonjour. Donc, bienvenue à IFAB Online, International Fundraising Across Border Online Conference. Today, we're going to talk about fundraising for North America from Asia. Did you know American universities have reported more than $1 billion in gifts from China and Hong Kong since 2014, making China their largest source of foreign donations? This data comes from the US Department of Education. I'm Arnaud Marcillassi from Paris, France, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Two great panelists are joining me, Marina Tan Harper from University of California, Davis. Bonjour, Marina.
Bonjour.
And Ivan Shin from University of New South Wales, Sydney. Bonjour, Ivan.
Bonjour, Arnaud.
I will tell you more about our panelists in a minute, but first, a few words about me because it's my birthday and it's really my birthday. I run an international fundraising consultancy based in Paris, France. I work for clients from various sectors: higher education, cultural, humanitarian, environment, medical research. My clients are in France, Belgium, Switzerland, and Francophone Africa. Before being a major gift fundraising consultant, I worked for a few years in Canada at World Vision, one of the largest child sponsorship organizations in North America. My company, IFAB Group, is part of a great international network of consultancies called Breakly. Today, believe it or not, like I said, it is really my birthday, and I take moderating this session as a great birthday present. This concept of bringing together experts from various backgrounds, cultures, and countries is a great idea. And thank you to Chapel in New York for that. It's been a real pleasure to prepare this session with Marina and Ivan. A few words about our panelists before I pass the floor to them. Expert fundraiser Marina Tan Harper has a foot in each region, the founding director of Singapore's Nanyang Tech University, and now a senior director of international development at the University of California, Davis. Marina knows the cultural differences and how to reach and engage the Asian donor from a US perspective. Marina has raised millions of dollars from all over the world, including Asia. She's presently running a $2 billion campaign at University of California, Davis. Marina is joined by Ivan Shin, who has worked extensively throughout Australia and the US. He has led the University of New South Wales international fundraising team in Australia and Hong Kong, as well as being director of development in different universities in the US. Ivan knows how to make the most of the US-Asia connection and will explain how to overcome any cultural pitfalls. So we have some PowerPoint presentations from our panelists, and I will share the presentation right now and pass the floor to Marina.
So in this my opening slide, I want to frame the context to let you know what is happening in the system that I'm working in at UC Davis, University of California, Davis. I came to Davis in 4.5 years ago, and that's when we started our international fundraising. Davis has, of course, fundraised since the late 70s, but this is the first time that the university has actually tapped onto its international constituents. So I am working on alumni, parents. UC Davis expats means they are Americans, our alumni, who have found a career and living outside of the US, a lot in Asia after the Great Recession. Friends, anybody who's also collaborating with us. So these are the constituents that I go down to meet most of the time. Our geographic reach is in North Asia, as you can see here: Japan, South Korea, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. And then in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia. I was about to start up in India, South Asia, when COVID hit. So, but I do already meet a lot of Indian parents who are expats in Southeast Asia. So I'm in touch with sort of the Indian population there. I have another colleague who works in Latin America, the countries in Latin America, and that's we started that slightly later, about 2 years ago. In the pre-COVID days, my role is to really make in-person visits myself, and then I bring leadership on. So I travel about 4 times a year, usually about a month. When I go outside, I'm out for a month. I also ride on faculty visits. So when my faculty is going on their own collaboration projects or doing things outside, I ride on it by asking them to make the visit on my behalf with certain alumni that I want to move the relationship forward when they're there. So it costs me nothing, because their airfare is paid by their department and everything. So those are called facilitated faculty visits. So these consist largely of one-to-one meetups. Sometimes I have committees down on the ground working on certain project to raise a small sum of money for a certain area, certain project. So I go there for committee meetings too. Usually I like to do just a one-table lunch or dinner, so that not to divert the attention too far, because these are fundraising conversations. When my chancellor and my vice chancellor goes there, he would host things like private dinners, 3 to 5 tables, still quite intimate. It's not a big, you all come kind of alumni event. So these are selected by invitation kind of alumni. Basically, these are cultivation and stewardship thank you dinners. Campus visits, when we're there, we'd like to invite people to come on campus, to come back to campus for campus visits, to see the place, how it has changed, and then we just use emails to keep in touch on and off. The team is not big. It's just myself and my colleague who does also frontline fundraising in Latin America. And we have one support staff in our small developing unit. I tap on a lot of resources that are inside university development, what we call the central office, or in the schools and units. So I think of the best ways to use other people's resources to do my work, right? Or they can also ride on me when I go down and I talk on their behalf and bring their materials down to interest people. So it's really a matchmaker's kind of job. Now, during COVID, all this is gone, of course. Everything is virtual, as you know. You guys are probably in the same shoes as I am. Now, what happens post-COVID? We are already anticipating that post-COVID, there's going to be hybrid scenarios. I learned so much during COVID because we were forced to do things virtually. The technology is already here, but we didn't know. And we just kept doing it the old way. But I think now there'll be lots of opportunities for multi-channel strategies. Multi-channels means you don't just use one thing, which is in the past, the visits, the in-person. I think there's a lot of chances to use virtual combined with some, it's just like in Phonathon, direct mail, no? You use multi-channel marketing. I think there's a lot of opportunities to ride on other departments' virtual programs, as I found out during COVID now. In fact, my university, UC Davis, just launched 2 weeks ago our public launch of a $2 billion campaign. You'll see behind in my backdrop. It's called the Expect Greater campaign. We passed the 1 billion. We were at 1.2 billion at the time of public launch of this campaign, which was all done virtually. It's quite amazing. It was originally planned as an in-person, maybe 100 to 200 persons. But when a virtual event happens like that, we had more than 1,000 people attend this public launch. So it was a surprise. In fact, I'm planning another event, a gala recognition event in Taiwan. Hopefully it will become a virtual event. We had to cancel the meeting like 3 times. No, the event is terrible. So I think the learning here is hybrid would probably be the way to go in the future.
Thank you, Marina. Ivan.
Thanks, Marina. Although my experience isn't nearly as exhaustive as my co-panelist, I've enjoyed working with overseas and international constituents since 2011. As Arno mentioned, by way of background, I've been with the University of New South Wales, or UNSW, since 2016. my vice president and I were appointed to develop a US-style fundraising program at an Australian university. So I hope that our participants find my experiences and my examples to be equally relevant. And before joining UNSW, I had the opportunity to engage in international fundraising at both Caltech as well as at UC San Diego's School of Global Policy and Strategy, from which I've included photos of one from each institution on that slide. From my experience, the target audience has been very similar to what Marina has shared previously, so I won't go into too much more depth there. With regards to where my team and I have focused our time and energy, it's really been city-based. And you'll note the cities where I've had experience. I've asterisked Jakarta and KL because these are cities that I haven't necessarily traveled myself, but because we have a significant presence there, members of my team have gone there. And Sydney, of course, where I live, is not in Asia. However, happy to draw from examples because of interest or questions that Arnaud may have. Pre-COVID, as with Marina, nearly all of our activities were in person. The sentiment with Asian constituents, of course, being that FaceTime, and I don't mean the Apple app, is incredibly important. Our international development team at UNSW grew overseas giving primarily out of Asia from 6% of what we call new funds raised to about 12% within about 24 months or so. So there was a lot of interest, quite a bit of low-hanging fruit, and a lot of energy that we put into our efforts, spending time and building relationships and strengthening relationships overseas. And certainly post-COVID, everything has also shifted online. Here in Australia, our borders have virtually closed to any sort of outbound international travel. So we can't really even get overseas if we wanted to. And combined with the financial pressures being faced by nearly all Australian universities as a result of funding models, in particular fees from international students, many are having to think about and reconsider what is the investment in international fundraising going to be. So these are just a few of the things that I wanted to help frame the context from my end, and look forward to the discussion as well as to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Marina.
So in this slide, first, if you're coming to Asia to fundraise, you must have an understanding of Asia from these contexts: the geographic, political, and historical. When I say geographic, sometimes I talk to people who come to Asia, they don't even know the geography of Asia. So that's quite sad. So just open up a map. You are looking at in South Asia, we're looking at Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. Most of us are fundraising in India. North Asia consists of China, Japan, South Korea, all right? Where is it? Over here. South Korea, China is really big. I don't think anybody's fundraising in Mongolia, I'm not sure, but China definitely in the East Coast here, North Korea, Japan here, Taiwan. Then you go down to Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia borders from what we call Myanmar today, it used to be Burma, all the way down out to Indonesia, and going down is where Ivan is at in Australia, which is sort of down here, all right? So now that these are called the nation states of Southeast Asia today. Now I need you to also understand that historically, these nations here are not called Southeast Asia. This was never really a name in this region, and it was sort of an unknown area with these little old names here, because the area from 13th century to up to 19th century was colonized by a lot of people, okay? So in the Philippines, the Spanish were there, and then the British East India Company first landed in South Asia in India, and then they moved out here to Burma, and you guys know the song Bridge Over the River Kwai. That was the famous. And then you have Malaysia. Now, Malaysia is divided to West Malaysia, which is the southern part, and then East Malaysia here. Singapore in the old days was called Temasek. There wasn't even the word Singapore. Most of these lands here, I would say, became nation states mostly in the mid 1900s. So before that, they were all colonized. Then you look at
the French only also, I must
right.
say.
Yes, the French East India Company was founded by Jean-Baptiste Colbert, and they were in India also. Everybody went to India because there were a lot of resources from cotton to everything. Okay, they were very heavy in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, the French. So you would find that some of the people that you're fundraising for, especially people of wealth, they would have French characteristics. They might even speak French, right? So you must know the history, because everything comes from history. You and I come from history, right? There's nothing in the world that has no history. So knowing a little bit of a history, when you speak to people there, you then begin to roll in quite nicely. The Dutch was in what is today called Indonesia. They were actually preceded by the Portuguese and the Spanish, who were there since Marco Polo came in the 13th century. So you see the history, Portuguese, Spanish, then the Dutch East India Company came in. Thailand was never colonized. Now, it was called Siam. It held itself, and it was really the only country that was never colonized. China in those days was under the Qing dynasty. Now, the Qing dynasty is the last imperial dynasty. They were under the Manchurians. The Manchus came down, conquered China, ruled for 300 years as a Chinese. The Manchurian became absorbed into the Chinese culture. It's quite strange, right? The foreigners came and they became Chinese. So they governed China for 300 years until 1912, when Pu Yu, the last emperor, the movie that you saw, when it fell, that was the last of it. And that was when all that big fighting happened until 1949, when the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party, came in, Mao Zedong, all right, and declared it a nation state, the People's Republic of China. And before that, of course, Taiwan already gone. You should also know, if you're fundraising in China, that Chinese are very sensitive to this 100 years of humiliation that really started from 1839 with the first Opium War. There were so many rebellions and wars that took it all the way up to 1949, before there was a settlement of Mao Zedong's CCP Communist Party. Now, you should also be aware of the political issues that are very hot in Asia right now, because these topics are being talked about every day. And you need to be sensitive who is on what side. The South China Sea is a big political hotbed right now. South China Sea is right here, and everybody is claiming a right to the sea. China, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, East and West Malaysia, Brunei, everybody says it's their waters. Anything under the waters are mine. Now, including UK and US is also have a presence there, because they also want to police that area and make sure that it's for free to use, The Korean Peninsula, you've already heard in the news, is a big hot topic between North Korea and South Korea. The Korean War has never ended in some ways. Taiwan, of course, is the hottest issue right now. So all these four things could cause nations to go to war. So you should be aware of these things as you come to fundraise in Asia, right? Asia is not homogeneous, because I find that a lot of my colleagues in America, oh, they're Asians. Let's go to Asia. Now, for goodness sake, Asians are all not homogeneous. Asia, the word Asian, and even Chinese themselves, there is so much diversity amongst them, as you can see from these nations and how they emerge from the colonies. If you read the history, they have tremendous differences because they were underscored by different cultures who colonized them. So when they eventually became nation states, what you see here, they are totally different when it's localized, right? Explicit diversity, one, you'd be aware that spoken, written language, you have to look at, even like in Thailand, they use Sanskrit. This tells you already, if they use Sanskrit, they have a Hindu past. There is a Hinduism underscoring in their culture, Hindu influence. The food. Now, we talk about food, even McDonald's, when you buy it in US and when you buy McDonald's in Singapore, they have different menus. In Singapore, the McDonald's they're allowed to have a rendang burger. Rendang is Malay sauce, okay, a sauce that is Malaysian or Peranakan, and you can't find any rendang burgers in the rest of the world. But McDonald's is clever enough to be aware of the explicit diversity in that country. And when they sell, so as you fundraise, as you take your principles from America down to the ground in all these different nation states, guess what? You have to do the McDonald's style, right? You have to mutate your little things to fit in to the flavors of the locality. The
McDonald's does it in France too. They have the Parisian burger.
Yeah, exactly. Or else I tell you, you're not going to have no business, right? Same with fundraising, right? So your attire, you notice that in Singapore, we have a group called the Peranakans. They wear a Chinese top and a sarong at the bottom. So they have themselves mutated. You know, the Chinese keep their top Chinese, but the bottom is a Malaysian style of wearing they wear a sarong, which is a wrap around. And of course, it's because it's hot too. Greetings in Thailand. Swadika for a female. You notice that in some cultures, the male and female use different sort of ending. For me, if I say thank you, I say kop kam ka. But if it's a guy, he'll have to say kop kun kap. That's for a male. So you will start to notice these explicit diversities. Festivals, a lot of people are celebrating the lunar events, right? Whether it's called Chinese New Year or South Koreans call it differently. So you'll be aware of these. Now, worship, rituals. You heard of your friends go tomb sweeping, right? Chinese, Qingming, they go tomb sweeping. It's not because they can't hire somebody to sweep the tomb. Why tomb sweeping? Tomb sweeping brings back to the flavor of Confucianism, where a lot of Asians are very filial to their parents. The element of filial piety is expressed explicitly in what is called tomb sweeping, means I respect my parents. Every year I go there and clean their the places where they are buried, right? That is tomb sweeping. Body language, you notice that in Thailand, Swadika, there's no body touching. There's a lot of very distant. It's not like America, right? Everybody starts hugging, even if you don't know one another. Actually, this is very good for COVID, all right? There's no hand touching. For COVID-19, this is a perfect way of greeting for all over the world, I think. And then how high you put your hand means what respect I'm paying to you. If it's the high priest, must be higher. The king, your head must be below that. If it's just a friend, maybe right at the heart, right? So you have to know this explicit language. This is body language. Gift exchange. The gift exchange is there to help build the relationship, the guanxi, right? And then there's reciprocity that is so enormous in Asia. It's an endless circle of dance, all right? You give me, I give you, and the thing doesn't seem to stop. If you want to know more about this, you should read the book called The Gift by Marcel Mauss, written by a Frenchman, right? That in fact, reciprocity was performed back centuries ago. And this is the way humans have done this. Now, implicit diversity is even more difficult. There are modes of persuasion by ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is based on ethics, all right? So you have to know the person that you're talking to, whether he is persuaded by ethics or pathos, which is emotional, whether he's more moved and can be persuaded by emotional language, emotional examples, or logos, which is very logical, right? Some people are just logical. So the giving impulse could be from the heart or all the way to the head. And you need to, at a glance, or maybe through a few times working with him, meeting him out for lunch, know whether he's going to be persuaded by whether it's ethos, pathos, or logos. And knowing some of his ancestry might also help. Here, I want to quickly read to you one of the paragraphs I hear. This is from my PhD that I interviewed one of a 90-year-old woman who finally explained to me, for Asians and for Chinese especially, it is more than family. It is about ancestry. So this is how she said. We are but a link in the journey of our family's ancestry, receiving the gift of life from our parents and the endowments that our ancestors have blessed us with. We contribute something back to pass on to the next generation. This is our role as a link in the human chain in this everlasting journey of mankind. Now, so this tells you how your prospect is thinking, what kind of gift and how it is structured. And another guy, he came and wanted to make two endowed gifts. So I said, do you want to name it after you and then your family? I thought, oh boy, I'm hitting it right on the head. He's a businessman. I name it after. He says, oh no, 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 please don't. Uh, Perhaps my children will remember to honor me when the time comes for them to give back, to follow my footsteps. But for now, I want to name it under my two parents, one father and one mother's name. Um, they will follow my footsteps in philanthropy and associate themselves with the good people in the ancestral line that came before them. You notice how important it was for these two people to be part of the ancestry. Don't even talk about family. It is really, they're seeing themselves as doing something for the ancestry, and then through that, they are recognized. So it is a very collective way. The collectivism is showing up. But this is the implicit part that is really quite hard to see until you work with him and you're talking about this. The collectivism is basically coming from Confucianism, where Confucianism is basically the hierarchy and order of relationships in the family, and of course, outside of a family, in the village, in the country. How should a king act? How should a father act? What is the responsibility of a child to a father to the wife? And so all these things makes them very collective. They know their role. They don't exist for themselves. They exist for the good of the broader picture of the family, the village, the ancestry. And sometimes when they give, they want to be low profile. They want their family or the ancestry to be highlighted, not themselves. So a gift in honor of their ancestry or their family, it would be very hard for them to say no. Say, well, Mr. Chen, would you like to make a gift in honor of your family? It's almost like he cannot say no, right? Then we can talk about it. And they want to be quiet because they want not themselves, but that bigger picture to be known. The Guanxi, then people say, wow, this China Guanxi is really complex. Why is it like that? It is because in the past, law in China is very weak. If something goes wrong, they don't have to go and report to the law, the government. They just go back and tell the patriarch of the family, and boy, that family name will be all dropped down, right? So nobody dares to perform any crime because it will bring shame and dishonor to the family. And because they associate with their family and their ancestry, nobody dares to spoil that thing because you are part of this whole big structure called the ancestry. But in all this, although there's a lot of materialism, a desire for money and all that, they still have a very, very high respect for American education. Must remember the early days when China was asked to pay indemnity to a lot of Western nations. America returned the money in 1900 something, and used that money to form the Tsinghua Preparatory School to give scholarships for Chinese studying in America. So from those early days of the Tsinghua Preparatory School, which today, of course, became Tsinghua University, they have always admired American education system and that goal of education to bring this concept of that freedom, the choice, a person's choice to make choices. All right, so these are some just general guidelines when you operate in Asia. There are 4 traits, really. The universal traits, I've explained a lot of these: family, ancestry, filial piety, top-down respect for the seniors, virtues, values. Location-specific, that means when that Chinese person got into Singapore or Indonesia, they have to follow the social norms of that location. If, let's say, my grandparents came down and migrated, and they want to assimilate. To assimilate, they need to listen to the social norms. If you landed in Malaysia, you'll be bound by Muslim culture, which is how the Peranakans came up with that different, sort of a mutated culture. The religious traditions of that culture in Thailand, doesn't matter what, whether you're Chinese, Indian, if you choose to migrate to Thailand, probably you'll be no, you will know how to give to temples. There are temples in Thailand, very important. You drive around the streets in Thailand, you see little places, small temple, medium temples, and companies also put a little corner to honor the spirits of that area. Evolution of your own language, festivals, and rituals will start to mutate as you begin to live in these locations that you choose to migrate to. Now, of course, today then there's this global thing, right? Transnational. Now, a lot of people, you don't even know which country they're from. They carry so many passports, and then they live 3 years in China, 3 months in China a year, 4 months in Singapore, 3 months in China, and then the rest of the time they are in US. So they will start to begin to have loyalties to these 4 countries, because each partner come from different countries, their children go to school in different countries, and then you have these mobile tablets and screen social media. After a while, you look at social media, you become global because you're listening and feeling the problems of different countries. So this global thing is now layering in. In the past, only universal and specific. Now, so you need to know where on the continuum is your prospect. How do you talk to your prospect? I can't give you the exact guidelines because now everybody is so mixed mash already, right? So are you talking to somebody who's got a lot of global and a little bit specific and some universal, which is occupying less than the whole thing? So if you're talking to someone very global, you need to know what to do, right? So the way you structure a gift, you cannot say, oh, only must benefit here, right? Because he's thinking globally, right? Now, if you're looking to somebody who is very location specific, right? A little bit of universal because these are his roots coming maybe from China, his grandparents still retain some of the roots, but he's probably can't even stand all this global stuff. Then talk about a gift that will benefit the location he comes from, all right? Because he's very location specific. Now, this guy has got a lot of historical family traditions that he wants to keep. He has to do some social norms and be part of the locals, and then a little bit global, you know. So you see how when you discuss your language, your structure of the gift, and what you ask him to support is all looking at where he sits. So although I've told you all about these cultural elements, they are just the cream on the cake in international fundraising. That is not the whole basis how you do international fundraising. In fact, the cake, and I put this IFB online pointing here, the cake is more important. More critical to the cultural is the principles of fundraising and best practices. And this is what we do even without international. In all fundraising, we need to have a business case, okay, or for this one. If you want to go international, you need to know why you're going international, not just because, oh, the other people are doing international, I'm also doing international. There are also a lot of strategic considerations, the timing of jumping in. What does it take? You need to know. Is your institution committed to it? Any risk assessments? What is the ROI that your boss is looking for? Okay. And you need to manage expectations because it's not like you jump in this month and next month the gifts start pouring in. All right. The academic leadership and faculty are they ready? Because you're not doing this on your own. You're doing this together with their programs out there. Okay, you have to build the foundation and the operations infrastructure, resources. You have to understand the cross-border legalities. Bringing money into the US or even UK from Asia is not easy, all right? Because you're crossing borders in all these legal things. The economic, social, political ecosystems out there in your university, the heat map, you need to know where your alumni are. Okay? Are they here, there? If you got no alumni, don't go there, all right? No parents, no alumni, just push it away. go to where your alumni and parents are. Okay, your database, is it in the state of readiness or not? If you've got no names, where are you going to go, right? The identification, qualification, engagement, cultivation, solicitation process, gift closing. Hopefully, your university has already all these lined up um, in your regular fundraising. And Ivan is going to now give you all these best things in principles of fundraising here.
Ivan.
Thanks, Marina. It's a really hard act to follow. I feel like I've just watched an episode of the History Channel or National Geographic. You did an excellent job. So as Marina noted, I'll talk a little bit about the cake, which is kind of the operational and the considerations as it relates to international fundraising. The first bullet point, I've specifically called it or referenced it as international advancement, because I feel like the most successful international fundraising programs also have an equally strong commitment to alumni relations and engagement. I think that the two go hand in hand and are critical for both to be successful. But some questions to ask as it relates to whether or not to initiate an international advancement or an international fundraising program is now the right time? And in this period where we're still trying to figure out what the implications of COVID are, it may not be the right time. So you may be best off pausing for now, doing a bit more planning, as Marina noted, preparing yourselves, preparing your campus, preparing your database, preparing faculty colleagues, school colleagues for what you intend to embark on. Another question is, what does it take? What is the investment involved to build a program from scratch? And starting a program is not an insignificant amount of time and resources. I think that, you're talking about 3 or 4 trips a year at 1 to 2 weeks at a time. It gets expensive very quickly. And does your institution have the ability to commit to this to a number of years? Because I feel as if you risk doing more damage than good if you kick off a program that only exists for 2 to 3 years until it's retrenched, and you have upset or disappointed or even angry major and principal gift donors and prospects who were led to believe that there was an institutional commitment that turned out to be a little bit less strong than they were led to believe. Another question is, where should colleagues be based? And I think we could probably spend an entire session on this. Should they be based in country? Is there an overseas campus there? Should they be based at the home institution? Should they be individual contributors working from a home office? There are a lot of considerations there. The second dot point, as it relates to collaborations, it's incredibly important for development colleagues who focus on overseas prospects and fundraising to have a strong relationship with their school or college-based colleagues, because it's really important for the college and the school-based colleagues to feel comfortable that someone other than themselves will be meeting and building and strengthening relationships with some of their best and most generous donors who happen to live overseas. And likewise, it's really important for the international fundraising colleagues to collaborate with school and college-based colleagues to help come up with priorities, campaign priorities that are going to resonate and be meaningful and be attractive and appealing for international alumni or parents or constituents who happen to live overseas. With regards to events, again, this goes hand in hand with the importance of an alumni relations and an engagement program. How do we use, large scale alumni summits to, as Marina mentioned earlier, small group lunches or dinners to deepen relationships with donors and volunteers? We want to be able to, provide great and meaningful opportunities for some of our best prospects to perhaps host or be an MC at an event, or to ask them to help underwrite the cost of the event, or to be a speaker. And likewise, we want to build the pipeline of board members or advisory council members in country. And how do we use these events to do that? And then finally, I think what Marina and would hopefully agree is that oftentimes when we're overseas on trips that are intended to be focused on fundraising, and we're traveling with either university leadership or school and college leadership, we're often asked to participate in relationship building with academic partners, with governments, with NGOs, and it may feel a bit uncomfortable at the outset, but I would really encourage everyone to embrace these, because we learn so much from these conversations, being at the table, learning a bit about what makes these other academic partners tick, what are their priorities, and being able to even build relationships with development teams from these other universities, which help us strengthen our pitch, help us understand the landscape better. And it's always great to meet new colleagues who happen to be working at other universities. But just like Marina said, where the structure and the operational issues may be the cake, the details and the nuances matter a lot. As Marina alluded to, status matters, and it matters a lot. Oftentimes when I'm in Singapore or in China, there's someone who is identified as the godfather, someone who has either been the most successful or is the earliest graduate from the university, and everyone looks up to him, and everyone wants to know what that alum is doing, because they don't want to make a gift that may outshine that alumnus. They don't want to make a gift, in fact, that is greater than the gift that that godfather might make. So it's really important to make sure that we don't underestimate the importance of status. We want to pack plenty of gifts, as Marina noted, in terms of gift exchange and business cards. I remember there was one time I was traveling with a delegation from Caltech, and one of my counterparts from the other university asked me, what is your role? And I used the Google Translate app and told her that my role was the gift donkey. I was the one that was responsible for bringing, all of our gifts and receiving theirs. And I think that moment of levity really just helped break the ice between the two of us, and it helped us inadvertently deepen our relationship to get stuff done on that trip and on the future trip. And, it sounds pretty crazy, but not having enough business cards or giving a business card improperly, it can really inadvertently create some challenges. I remember one instance with my boss. We were meeting with an alumnus in Beijing, and unfortunately, he had just run out of business cards at an alumni event the evening before. And even though he was the senior person in the room, the alumnus was so put off by the fact that my boss didn't have a business card to give him that he wouldn't even look at him, and was speaking with me, who was the junior guy in the room. And so since then, my boss, packs just a box of business cards so that he won't run out. And I always just, have to remind him, remember that time, and he gets it now. The next point is really, it's about family, and Marina did an excellent job covering this, in that, it's a great sign when a prospect or a donor wants us to be introduced to members of their family. It means that the relationship that we've built is strong enough and meaningful enough to them that they want us to meet members of their family. They want to bring us into their world. And while that's less common in the States, it's something that we want to embrace. And to that end, oftentimes we're invited on social activities in a way that doesn't happen in the US, whether it be a hike, whether it be a river cruise, whether it be, spending the afternoon or the entire day on a weekend. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and one that we should always be, that I would encourage you to graciously receive, because not only will you learn more about the culture, more about the city that you're visiting, but you'll also see another side of the prospect or the donor that you wouldn't ordinarily get or get to have meeting them in their office. And finally, to the point that we've made earlier with regards to status and with regards to university leadership who we may be traveling with, oftentimes, even though our responsibility is to help build the relationship, there is an expectation that they want to meet the boss. They want to meet your boss. They want to meet your boss's boss. They want to meet your boss's boss's boss, and it goes up as far as it can go. And it's by no means any sort of disrespect or any knock on what you've done or what we've done, but it's simply they just want to be in the room and have a conversation with the most senior people with your university or your institution. Thanks, Erna.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Okay, so now we'll have a little discussion about these points that you made. It was really interesting. I've really learned a lot. I have clients in France, universities, NGOs, who were looking before at the US like the heaven of fundraising. And actually, they still think it's the heaven of fundraising. But now they're looking at Asia as the next fundraising heaven. And like for the US, they just think that no, we have a great case. So let's go there and meet some people, and they're all gonna love us and give us millions of dollars. It's obviously not the case. It's very complicated. It takes a lot of preparation, and I think we've heard that from you guys, the two of you. And in the present time, I mean, it's not only about COVID that is preventing us from traveling and having a relationship with our donors or different kind of relationship, but it's really lots of cultural issues, and then there's the what you call the cake. And my first point was about that cake. Is the cake really the same when fundraising in Asia? And when we prepared this session, we talked about this French writer, philosopher, Tocqueville, who wrote this book in the 17th century, Democracy in America. And even at that time, he was mentioning how people were, getting together, the volunteering, and the sense of helping each other and getting together to make the society better and all that stuff, which is completely different in Europe and especially in France. So that's my first point, and the kind of a dialogue with you. Is the cake really the same when it comes to fundraising in Asia?
Yeah, so the cake, the original cake, usually people make reference to the original cake as coming from the US, because in the US they have done professional fundraising since 1970. So they've got all these principles all nicely packaged and best practices, and then you have case, that has so officially marked the milestones of a program, how it goes. So I think a lot of people would take the original cake from the US, but as you bring it down to France, to Germany, these are welfare countries, welfare state countries. Then you have bring it to China, even more welfare because they're communist system. You want to make sure that the government knows that they're doing their job as a social welfare state, providing all these things. And then in Southeast Asia, where there's a lot of capitalism, money coming out, US capitalism, I think the cake has to mutate. The cake has to mutate because I showed you those traits, the universal traits, and then the location specific traits. Even McDonald's mutated their cake, right? The cake was originally the burger from McDonald's in the US, but when it went to Singapore and Malaysia, they came out with a rendang burger. When they went to France, they got their little different. And then when you go to Japan, you must tune to the taste of the Japanese. Your cake has to be different. It's just like playing variations on a theme by Paganini. You have the main variation, all right, nice tune, and then he goes twangy, twangy, twang when Paganini, if he really arrives in America, his tune is changed because he smells the American spirit and he has variations. So I think we also need variations on the theme, but it does not change the fundamental values of the principles. The very principles of fundraising is still there. Relationship builds the dollars. Okay, you just don't go there and dig up the dollars. You build the relationship. So relationship building is different from country to country. Here's where the variations takes place.
So, I mean, I'd agree with you. And, Marina and Arno, we'd had a conversation that my sentiment is that the cake in Asia is pretty similar. It's just a bit more starchy, a bit more glutinous, and generally has a bit more red bead. It's still delicious. And I feel as if the opportunities and the way that we go about things, by and large are pretty similar. But we just have to, as Marina did such a wonderful job pointing out, have to adjust and make sure that we're not taking a one-size-fits-all approach, and we can find success regardless of where we are.
Okay, moving to the next point, which is the icing on the cake, and we talked about that, and the cultural side of it, fundraising in Asia, the geographical, and things like you can't talk about China as a whole. There are different regions and cultures within China. And Ivan, you talked also about having your colleagues on site. Maybe you need Chinese team in China to develop your campaign. So about the icing. How important is it in making your fundraising successful when you try to raise funds in Asia?
The icing really comes from that slide that I have about the continuum. Remember the continuum of the universal traits, the location specific, and the global. Very dangerous with Chinese these days. Even these Chinese who are coming from China itself, the slice of global might be so wide, and their slice of universal could be very small because of the cultural revolution. It really took out a lot of the Confucianism in the younger generation. A lot of the younger generation who were born, in 1950s, 60s, especially, have no memory of Confucianism. It was gone, so they have no slice of Confucianism. So don't be fooled. They look like a Chinese, but they don't know Confucianism. In fact, I, who lived in Southeast Asia, knew more Confucianism rituals and worship and whatever, ancestral things, because my grandparents left China before all these things happened and took with them all these rules and rituals and then planted it in our families outside of China. So the guy outside of China knows more Confucianism embedded in him than the guy who is living in China. So if you don't know the historical and political culture of these nations that you're now fundraising from, it is very sad because they look at you. After that, they go home, they laugh. Because one time I went and talked with a British person, and she asked me whether we still live on trees. I was like, oh my God, live in trees? That is like Tarzan. I don't know any part of my own history where my ancestors lived on trees. I don't know where she saw the comic book or something like that. So it is like that. We could say something so funny that they go home and they laugh, So I think that icing thing is all about that, the continuum. So you need to understand where your prospect sits. And how do you know these things? Some of these things are through conversation. Like Ivan said, he was invited to go to the family's party. When you go for the family's party, you will notice how they celebrate, whether they're celebrating the Western style or the very traditional style, must eat that long noodles for longevity, and then the cake for, good relationships in the family. You will then know whether this person is very stuck to the traditional family values, or that Chinese could be a total Westerner. He's raised in America and don't know anything about his own culture. Then you talk to him like an American.
Thank you. We're coming to the end of this great session. As a conclusion, and you know, we have all these fundraisers listening to us and trying, you know, to figure out what their international campaign could be. Any top tips or takeaway we could give them as a conclusion? For example, when we discussed before, I've heard from you, Marina, that this concept of moves management is so important in the US in terms of in fundraising. And but what I'm hearing too, that it's in Asia, it's really fundraising first, and you know, getting to in touch with people and getting to know them and taking your time, and obviously the COVID it comes in the way. But any top tips, takeaway we could give to our friends fundraisers that are listening to us in the conclusion?
So I'll go first and then turn it over to Marina for the final word. I mean, I think, you know, very simply, just do whatever Marina says, I'm going to do. So I think that's a good starting point. But I think the second point is sort of the point that Marina was making earlier with regards to one of our colleagues who was visiting with alumni over almost a decade and hadn't yet gotten to the solicitation point. I feel like, you know, there's a balance. I feel like we want to spend the time to properly build a relationship with prospective or current supporters, while at the same time letting them know that our role, our responsibility is to raise money for a university that either they went to, their child attends, or they have an interest in, so that that's always out there. And so we can always have a point for these meetings, as opposed to having, you know, meeting after meeting after meeting that are nice meetings and we share a lot in common, but we don't get to the point of asking for their financial support.
Yeah, that is true. In the why the American fundraising is so effective and the efficacy is so high is because of what Ivan just said. In America, we fundraisers have metrics. We work based on metrics, and after a certain time, if you're going to see a person and you still not getting back the dollars, you have to justify, or else you have to sunset your prospect. Sunsetting of a prospect. It's not like you do it forever. Now, this person at Cornell who did it for 9 years, there must be a reason that they are smelling numbers in the 9-figure or 8-figure gifts. 9-figure and 8-figure gifts lives by a little house on its own, all right? So they are playing the long game here. It's a very, very long game. They might be looking at a few things, you know, a planned gift, a cash gift, and a collaboration because of the hospitality. They are hotel owners, and so their game is very, very long, playing a long game. The other thing is that lady probably comes once a year, but in between, there is this thing, what I call omnipresence engagement. Omnipresent engagement means you don't have to be there, but you have to be like the God, you know, you have to be omnipresent. Every time they think about, when let's say they inherited some money, oh, who should I give to? UC Davis. It must be at the top of their head. And how do you become a memory at the top of their fingers? They don't recall other names, you know, suddenly they only recall UC Davis. It is because you have every 3 months sent them something that they're interested to read about. I've already known that no, he raised 2 children who are fully handicapped, and I have an institute, a Mind Institute, that does really autism, handicapped children, and he's probably reading the stuff so that when he inherits the money, boom, he needs to know where the money goes. So your omnipresent engagement, you have to figure out how you do it, but you have to earn the support. You cannot just say, because hey, I show up 9 years already, every time 1 year, I should be getting your money. You really have to earn the money. You have to earn the support. You must not feel that, oh, the other guy's job is easier, mine is harder, because, you know, as a fundraiser, you might say that, and we all have that tendency. It's natural. You have to work with the cards that you were dealt with, just like how you were born, right? You cannot blame, oh, you are a bad parent, you don't have money, mother. You know, I wish I was born in the other family has more money. We all have cards that are dealt with when we were born, when we came into the job. And some of the cards are very hard in some places, some harder. So you have to realize that your cards are actually the best cards. You must believe that your cards are the ones that will work, and you work within the context that you are. You leverage on the positive things of what you were given in your organization. And like Ivan said, you must dare to take the first step. You cannot over analyze and over research and everything. Once you take that first step, that data that you collect in talking to your alumni or soliciting your alumni, a mailing or whatever it is, that will give you the reality of what you imagined. Sometimes once you overanalyze, your imagination is different from what's on the ground. And that's dangerous, no? So once you take the first step, you get a sense of reality, and you use that data to adjust your program back and forth, front and back, sieve it around, you know. It's like air fryer. You got to open halfway to see where it's cooked, you know what I mean? Whether you need 5 more minutes, 2 more minutes, or don't do anymore. It's all black already in the air fryer. You're going to pull it out. So take the first step. Don't be afraid of that first step. Nothing can explode, you know. Just take the first step, get the data, and see whether your imagination is still good, you know. And I think I sometimes use fundraising committees on the ground to advise me. I don't know all the nuances of the cultural stuff. The people who are helping you are your alumni in your committees. They can tell you, Marina, you look really stupid. You know? So I'm also advised by other people who knows the ground better, especially in international fundraising. And then my bosses, they're all in American ground, right? They think it should be like that, like that, like that. Just take it with a pinch of salt, because nothing is more realistic than when the people on the ground, when you take that first step, ouch, you know?
Thank you so much, Marina. I think it's the end of this session. It was really great. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Fundraiser, for joining us, and goodbye and au revoir.